When you attribute all human problems to some psychological condition that's based on their past or their surroundings, of course, our past can have an effect on us. Of course, someone who grew up in an abusive home is going to have certain reactions and feelings. But I think one of the biggest detriments of modern psychology, built on Freudian and Jungian, is that it removes the necessity of the gospel. It's like, oh, here, do this, do that, and you'll be better. Or it doesn't trace it to the sin condition. And even though sometimes people may have things that have affected them, there's still sin.
Guilt is not always a bad thing. Guilt is a good thing if you're guilty. If you're guilty, then guilt is good because it's saying something is radically wrong, that you've sinned against God, you need a new heart with new desires. One thing I find very, very difficult to embrace is the thought, and it just seems to be embraced worldwide by so many in the world, is that is, if you have depression, you have a mental disease. That is, you are insane. And we're telling you, you're insane. The reason they lean towards that is because that opened the door to pharmaceutical industries, because they changed the diagnosis of what you have, and now they can give you medicine to fix your mental problem. And what that does for someone who's depressed is it adds to their depression. I'm depressed about life. And so we should be. Life is incredibly depressing, especially with the fear of death haunting every human being. In fact, I've written a book called The Final Curtain that gives evidence that the problem with depression is a continual haunting of the fear of death, which is speaking to directly by Hebrews 2, verse 14 and 15. Even with so many soldiers coming back home and committing suicide like never before, comes back to a fear of death. On the battlefield, it was something that they just accepted. A fear of death was always there. Come back home, you're sitting in bed, you've still got that fear of death that haunts you and drives many to suicide. So instead of saying you have a mental disease because you're depressed, no, it's the exact opposite. You're not mental, you're incredibly sane because you're thinking about life. Life is depressing with all its sickness, its pain, its suffering, and the death on top of it. You are living in a world without hope, and when you've got no light at the end of the tunnel, it just becomes overwhelming to where suicide becomes an option. But as Christians, we offer light at the end of the tunnel. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And that's why we should address the fear of death when we're witnessing to unsaved people. You fear death? Yes, a little bit. That's what a guy said to me the other day, a little bit. I said, a little bit? You mean a big bit? He says, a big bit. I said, it haunts you, doesn't it? He says, yeah, all the time. They embrace the gospel because that door opened it. There's this elephant in the room that no one talks about that's stomping on the whole of humanity. Got its foot above every human being. And that's enough to make anyone who thinks depressed. They're not mentally unstable. They're very sane. They think about life and its issues. They've got a right to be depressed until they come to the foot of the cross.
This video is part of the Living Waters podcast. To watch full episodes and explore more content that equips you in your faith, visit livingwaters.tv. You can listen to the full episode titled on the screen for free on all major podcast platforms.